My father told me over the phone that today was the last day I'd get help from them, said it flat, like he was canceling a subscription. I didn't raise my voice, didn't beg. I just said, then today is also the last day you stay under my roof. He went silent. You could hear it, like the room around him had stopped breathing. And in that pause, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until then. They were never staying with me. They were waiting for me to fail. I'd just gotten home from work, second shift dragging past 8 again, groceries biting into my wrist as I fumbled for the door, and before I could even set the bags down, my phone buzzed. Dad. I almost didn't answer because we'd had a small argument the night before about the thermostat again, but something in me, old habit maybe, picked up on the third ring. He didn't say hi, didn't ask if I was home safe, just started in like he'd been rehearsing. Today's the last day you get help from us. Go get a job or quit. We don't care anymore. I paused, frozen in the middle of the kitchen, still holding onto the handle of a paper bag that was slowly giving way under the weight of canned soup. I blinked, the words landing in pieces, and then I let go of the bag, not because I was angry, but because I'd stopped needing to hold it together. Then today's also the last day you stay under my roof, I said, quieter than I meant to, steadier than I expected. For a second, I thought the line had gone dead. Then I realized the silence wasn't from bad signal, it was from him, stunned, speechless. He tried to recover, you could hear it in the breath he took, sharp like someone bracing for a slap. Excuse me, he said, but it wasn't a question, it was a threat wrapped in confusion. I walked over to the table and finally set the rest of the groceries down, the apples bruising against the wood. You heard me, I said. This is my house. You live here because I let you. That ends today. There was a pause, then another one, longer, and then he hung up. No shouting. Just a click. Which, from him, was worse. 5 minutes later, I heard the familiar thud of his shoes on the stairs. I didn't move. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, next to a bag of spinach I knew was already wilting, waiting to see what kind of storm would follow. He didn't knock. He just opened the door like he always did, like the space I paid for still belonged to him. You want to explain that phone call? He asked, eyebrows already tight, voice trying to sound in control. What is this, some kind of tantrum? I sat down and looked up at him. It's a boundary. You think because you own 4 walls and a roof that you can talk to me like that, he said, stepping further into the room, like he could reclaim authority by proximity. I tilted my head slightly. No, I said, I think I can talk to you like that because you forgot that I do. He scoffed, pacing once. Unbelievable. After everything we've done for you. This is how you repay us. The anger didn't even sting. I felt detached, like I was watching someone else's family argument unfold in a stranger's house. I'm not repaying you, I said. I'm reclaiming myself. My mother appeared in the doorway then, in that quiet way she always does when she wants to observe without getting her hands dirty. She looked at me, then at him, then back at me again. What's going on? She asked, even though she already knew. Your daughters decided we're tenants now, he barked. Apparently, we're not welcome unless we beg. I stood. That's not what I said. But if you're going to twist my words, at least be honest about it. She crossed her arms, posture sharp. You've always been dramatic, Mara. Don't make a scene. I almost laughed. I opened the window instead, just to breathe. The air outside was heavy with the kind of early spring chill that settles in your bones, not sharp, just present, and I let it fill the room. You've been living here for over a year, I said, still watching the wind shift the curtains. You never offered rent, never asked about bills, you just existed. Like this was owed to you. He bristled. We raised you. You think you'd even have this house if it weren't for us? I turned. No, I have this house because I worked for it. Despite you. The words weren't meant to cut, but I knew they would. Still, it was the truth. I was 28 years old, working full-time since I was 19, building myself out of scraps of stability, patching over cracks they left behind. You can stay the night, I said. But you'll need to find another place starting tomorrow. I'll help you look, but you're leaving. He opened his mouth, probably to protest, but she touched his arm lightly, deliberately, and he went quiet. Not in surrender, but in calculation. You'll regret this, he said. I didn't answer. I just turned away. That night, I sat in the dark and let the quiet tell me things I hadn't let myself hear in years. I listened to the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the old refrigerator, the subtle sounds that had once comforted me, now changed by their presence. I used to think silence was loneliness, but it wasn't. Not anymore. It was the sound of space returning to me, of something loosening in my chest, a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned, thinking I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to be heard. I woke up before sunrise, the kind of early that hums in your chest before your body even feels it, and I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the hallway light seeping under my door. They were awake. I could tell by the sound of the kettle, Mom's uneven footsteps, the quiet shuffle of paper, maybe bills or letters she wasn't supposed to read. I stayed still, listening to the house breathe differently with them inside it, how their energy filled every corner before I even opened the door, as if my home had somehow become theirs overnight. When I walked into the kitchen, they both turned like they'd rehearsed it, like two actors in a scene that never changed. My dad leaned on the counter with the mug I bought last Christmas, the one with the chipped handle he always said was too delicate, and my mom was already dressed like she had somewhere important to be, even though she didn't. We talked, she said, folding her arms like a decision had been made. And we've decided to leave by the end of the month. My dad nodded, pretending it was his idea, but it wasn't. That's fine, I said, reaching for the second mug on the shelf, the plain black one no one else ever used. I was going to give you until the 20th anyway. He flinched at that, like it stung to not have the upper hand, and my mom's jaw tightened. You don't have to treat us like this, she said, voice low, steady. We've been through enough without you acting like we're squatters. I didn't look up. I treated you like family, you treated me like furniture. Let's not rewrite it now just because the ending's uncomfortable. She blinked once, then looked away. They didn't speak again until I sat down. The kitchen was warm, but my hands felt cold against the mug, and the silence between us wasn't hostile. It was something quieter, a kind of resignation that tasted like old dust. We never planned to stay forever, my dad muttered, eyes on the window. We just needed time, and you made it into something ugly. I didn't answer right away, because it would have been easy to say you made it ugly, easy to start that loop again, but I'd spent enough years inside their blame to know where it led. Mom shifted in her chair, picking at the corner of a napkin like it offended her. I gave up a lot for you, Mara, she said, and her voice trembled the way it does when she wants to sound hurt, not mean. You act like you owe us nothing, like we didn't raise you when things were hard. That was the part that always came back, the debt I never signed up for but somehow carried. You raised me, I said, quiet but steady, and then you resented me for needing you. You loved me when I didn't ask for anything. She scoffed, pushing her chair back like the room had turned on her, but it hadn't. It just stopped absorbing the things she said without consequence. You have no idea how hard things were, she said, standing now, pacing slow. We held our marriage together for your sake. We moved into this house for you. I raised my eyebrows at that. You moved in because you had nowhere else to go. My dad exhaled, sharp, tired. We thought this house would feel like family again, but clearly it doesn't. I stared at the floor. It did. Until you lived in it. I spent most of the afternoon in the back room, folding laundry that wasn't mine, listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing, things being packed and repacked like they were practicing their exit, but didn't want to admit it. It wasn't satisfying, it wasn't even peaceful, it just felt like something inevitable was finally arriving, and I hated that it came with this much silence. Around 5, I knocked gently on their door, handed my mom a list of local rentals I'd printed. She didn't look at it. You think this fixes anything? She asked. I didn't answer. Later that night, while I was making tea, I found the old photo she kept tucked in her planner, me at age 6, sitting in the back seat of our first car, smiling through a busted lip I was told not to mention. I stared at it for a long time, then tucked it back where I found it. We all survive our childhood differently. Some of us build distance, others build denial. And sometimes, the only apology you ever get is them leaving quietly, carrying boxes of the blame they swore didn't belong to them. That has to be enough. The hallway was still, the kind of stillness you only get when people are pretending everything's fine. I moved slowly, barefoot, tea mug balanced in my hand, stopping just short of the laundry room, where the floor vent creaked if you stood too long. Their door was open just a sliver, enough for voices to carry without being invited. My name came first, not angry, just tired, or at least trying to sound that way. She's always been difficult, my mom said, and the way she said it, like I wasn't just downstairs, made something in me go very still. She thinks this house makes her better than us, my dad said, not cruel, just casual, like he'd always believed it, but never said it out loud. Let her play homeowner for now. She'll break soon, she always does. My mom laughed, short and dry. Once she realizes we're all she's got, she'll come crawling back. She just needs to starve a little. They weren't whispering. They weren't even angry. Just matter of fact, like they were making plans around me, like I was a variable they could outwait. I didn't breathe, didn't move, just stared at the vent and listened. She's ungrateful, my mother added, folding something, maybe a sweater, maybe a memory. We gave her everything. And now we're treated like a burden? There was a pause, a kind of silence that let you know someone was shrugging. That house will swallow her whole, Dad muttered. She doesn't have the money to carry it. She's working 2 jobs and still barely keeping up. She'll regret pushing us out. I leaned against the wall, mug pressed to my chest, and let the words settle like dust on skin. They didn't plan to leave. They planned to watch me fall apart from a distance. Later, in the kitchen, I poured the rest of the tea down the drain, hands shaking more from restraint than anger. I didn't slam anything. I didn't cry. I just leaned against the counter, tracing the edge of a receipt I'd left out, rent payment from last month, groceries, electricity, all in my name. All mine. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the quiet you get after realizing something permanent about people you once loved blindly. I thought about confronting them, about knocking on the door and asking who exactly they were talking about. Instead, I walked back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my phone. I opened a voice memo, recorded myself whispering what I'd heard, just in case I ever tried to tell myself I was being too sensitive, too unforgiving. That's the worst part about long histories, they make you second-guess your own clarity. I didn't need to replay the recording, but I kept it, tucked away between grocery lists and late-night reminders, like proof that I hadn't imagined how calculated they sounded, how much comfort they took in my supposed failure. The next morning, they acted normal, too normal. My mom made coffee, humming lightly under her breath, and my dad asked if I wanted the car that weekend, like we were still in that blurry stage of temporary arrangement. I nodded, didn't argue, just went through the motions, watching their eyes for any sign they knew I'd heard. But they didn't look guilty. They looked settled, like people waiting for something to snap that wasn't them. I sat at the table, watching sugar dissolve into black coffee, and wondered how many times they'd talked like that before, when I wasn't listening. "You seem quiet today," Mom said, watching me over the rim of her mug. "Everything okay?" I looked up, met her eyes, and smiled. "Just tired," I said. She nodded, satisfied, and turned to check the toast. "You should take a break soon. All that independence catches up to you." I didn't reply. I just watched her hands as she buttered the bread, slowly, evenly, like nothing in the world had shifted. My father scrolled through his phone, half listening, waiting for someone else to speak first. They didn't notice the way I was looking at them, like strangers who lived in familiar skin. That night, I didn't cook. I didn't make enough noise for them to ask questions. I went for a walk around the block, slow, deliberate steps under flickering streetlights, and let the cold bite my fingertips until they felt real again. When I came back, the house was dark, both doors closed, but I didn't feel alone, just clear. I knew what needed to happen next, not for revenge, not for control, just for air. You can't keep living with people who are rooting for your failure and calling it love. You can't heal in the same room that broke you. I left work early the next day, didn't tell anyone why, just packed my bag and walked out before the sun dropped too low behind the power lines. The sky was soft and uneven, like something waiting to bruise, and when I got home, their car wasn't in the driveway. It was the first moment of real silence I'd had in weeks. I walked straight into the living room, opened the cabinet where I kept envelopes, and wrote their names across 2 manila folders, the way someone does when they've stopped waiting to be asked for permission to draw lines. Each folder had a short letter, clear, measured, kind in tone, but firm in shape. One was for my mother, one for my father. I didn't use phrases like, "you made me feel." I just listed what had been done. Skipped bills, dismissed boundaries, conversations I heard that weren't meant for me but were about me. I included apartment listings, contact info for a moving service I'd already called, and the number of a housing office that might help with subsidies if they needed it. The last line read simply, "You have until the 28th. I won't extend it." They came home just after 7, laughing about something in the car, something from a grocery store or a TV show, I couldn't tell. I sat at the kitchen table, folders stacked neatly in front of me, and when the door opened, my mother paused like she felt the air shift. My dad walked in behind her, keys jangling in his hand, the plastic bag swinging at his side. "You're home early," he said. "Everything okay?" I nodded, didn't speak yet. My mother looked at the folders. "What's this?" she asked, already knowing, already defensive, as if paper could accuse her. I slid them across the table, one toward each of them, keeping my hand flat, my voice quiet. "It's time," I said, and that was all. My father furrowed his brow, opened the folder too quickly, eyes scanning like he was hoping to find a mistake. "You're giving us notice?" he asked, and the way he said it made it sound ridiculous, like the idea of being asked to leave my home was offensive. "You said you were leaving at the end of the month," I replied. "I'm just putting it in writing, so we're all clear. No confusion." My mom didn't open hers right away. She just stared at me. "You really want us gone that badly," she said, not angry, just injured in that performative way she'd perfected over years. "After everything we've done?" I looked at her, tired, not bitter. "You've been planning your exit for weeks. I just gave you a date." My dad shook his head, pushed the folder back toward me. "You're being dramatic again. This doesn't have to be war." I didn't move the folder. "I don't want war. I want peace. And peace means you living somewhere else. This house needs space to breathe." They didn't argue right away. The silence settled like dust on a shelf, something unacknowledged but heavy. My mom finally broke it. "You'll be alone," she said, like it was a punishment. I shrugged. "I already am." Her mouth opened to reply, but nothing came. My dad leaned back in his chair, like the room had suddenly become smaller, less comfortable. "You think you can handle this place without us?" he asked. "You think your job will cover it?" I didn't answer with numbers. I just said, "I've been covering it. You just weren't looking at the bills you didn't pay." They left the table quietly, their footsteps slow, tired maybe, but not remorseful. I stayed where I was, hands folded in my lap, watching the papers flutter slightly in the breeze coming from the half-open window. In the hallway, I heard the bedroom door click shut. Not slammed, just shut. The way people do when they want to pretend they were never in the room at all. I didn't cry, didn't breathe heavy. I just watched the clock on the wall, each tick confirming the moment had passed, each second proof that the house was already starting to return to me. Later that night, I walked room to room, checking lights, closing drawers, feeling the house respond in quiet ways. The living room didn't hum the way it usually did, their energy thinning out, the weight of unspoken expectations finally starting to lift. I stood in the doorway of the guest room, the one I'd painted myself, the one I used to imagine turning into an art space or a reading corner, and for the first time, I could see it without their things in it. I didn't smile, just nodded to no one. This was never meant to be permanent. They left on a Tuesday, the kind that starts gray and doesn't shift much, the sky flat, air still, everything unremarkable except the space between footsteps. They didn't say goodbye, not out loud, but I heard drawers closing softer than usual, doors opening and staying open longer than they needed to, bags zipping slowly, carefully. I stayed in the kitchen, hands resting on the counter, listening to the house exhale. When the door finally closed, it didn't slam, didn't creak, just shut with a sound that felt more like a period than a question. After that, the silence stayed still. They didn't leave much behind. A few hangers, a broken mug that had been theirs long before this place, 2 bath towels folded neatly on the back of the door, and her rosary beads, resting against the bedroom windowsill like she wanted me to see them. I didn't move them right away. I stood in the doorway, eyes tracing the shadow they left, wondering if it was forgetfulness or intention. Either way, I left them there for the night. I vacuumed the rug, wiped down the kitchen table, folded the throw blanket they used on the couch. Every small act felt final. The next morning, I woke up late for the first time in months. The house was still, truly still, without background movement, without footsteps or voices or doors being pushed too far open. I made breakfast slowly, 1 egg, 2 slices of toast, and ate it by the window, watching the street, hearing only the ticking of the clock above the sink. I didn't rush to clean up, didn't worry if I was being too quiet or not quiet enough. The chair creaked under me in a familiar way, the mug warm in my hand, and I finally exhaled. I found the old paint swatches later that afternoon, buried behind cookbooks in the kitchen drawer, colors I never had the time or space to try. I held them up to the light, watched how they changed with the sun, how the beige turned to gold in certain corners. I walked room to room, tape measure in one hand, notepad in the other, not planning something big, just thinking. Maybe a new rug, maybe plants, maybe nothing. I didn't feel triumphant, just open. The space wasn't empty, it was clean. There's a difference. I could feel it in my ribs. They called once, 2 weeks later. I let it ring, not out of bitterness, just timing. I was in the middle of sorting receipts, phone face down on the table, too deep in the rhythm of silence to break it. They didn't leave a message. I think part of them thought I would call back just to keep the thread from snapping, but threads only hold when both sides are pulling, and I had stopped. There was no grand decision, no vow, just the weight of things already spoken, already lived. I didn't block them. I just let it fade. A month passed before I noticed how different the walls sounded when I spoke out loud. I started talking again, sometimes just to myself, sometimes to music playing low in the background. I hummed while folding laundry, read emails out loud, narrated recipes like I was hosting a show. The echo was gentler now, not because the house had changed, but because I had. I was no longer shrinking to keep peace. I was taking up space in the place I bought, filling it slowly, without apology. Peace doesn't ask to be earned. It just arrives when nothing's left to fight for. That spring, I invited friends over for dinner. Nothing big, just 2 people who'd seen me through the worst parts, who didn't need updates because they already knew. We ate on mismatched plates, laughed about things that had nothing to do with pain, and when they left, they hugged me like I wasn't fragile. I cleaned up in the quiet, put the kettle on, sat by the window with my feet pulled up under me. I didn't check my phone. I didn't check the locks twice. I just sat there, still, soft, whole in a way that didn't need proving. Before I went to bed, I passed by the guest room again, paused in the doorway. The beads were still there, untouched. I picked them up, not gently, just carefully, the way you handle something that doesn't belong to you anymore. I wrapped them in a paper towel, set them in a drawer, and closed it without thinking. There was no ceremony, just the quiet knowledge that some things don't need to stay visible to still be remembered. Then I turned off the light, let the house settle, and walked into the room that finally felt like mine again.